Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session of Citi Talks Payments. My name is Melissa Tuozzolo, and I lead market management industry initiatives for the FI Payments product team at Citi. And today we have a really interesting session talking about sort of the future of SWIFT payments and the SWIFT platform strategy that's recently been announced. And joining me is David Watson, who is actually a fantastic guest for this because, Dave, I know there's some congratulations in order here as you've just been announced as the new head of strategy at SWIFT. So if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and this fantastic new role.
Sure, Melissa, and thank you for inviting me. So I'm actually a career banker, 17 years, mainly in transaction banking and mainly on the product side of the house, although also time in both operational and commercial roles. And around about a year and a half ago, I decided to take a slightly different approach to my career and move into a position where instead of helping one company, I could help the industry. And that led me to coming to work here at SWIFT, obviously a cooperative owned by the banks for the banks to provide international transactional services. And after a year with SWIFT of running our commercial business in North America, I have, yes, taken on a new role as our Chief Strategy Officer.
Oh, that's great. So you're on the other side of the table now, right? To where we all were previously. So now you have to manage all of us banks. But no, that's fantastic, and we're really excited that you're in this new role. And like I said earlier, it's a really interesting time right now in the industry, and I'm sure you've got your hands full with everything happening. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about this new platform strategy that SWIFT has announced as of a couple of weeks ago, I guess the official announcement that now that it's been fully approved by the board. Can you tell us a little bit about why, I guess, where this sort of strategy came from and why now? You know, I know in this Citi Talks Payments, in the sessions that we've had, we've been talking a lot with new models and challengers and changes in the payment space. But again, maybe you can tell us a little bit about why SWIFT is taking this step now.
Sure, happily. I think it's a very interesting time for SWIFT, and I must admit that's one of the reasons I joined the organization. We're at something of a pivotal moment in the forward of international transactions in the community, driven a little bit by, I think, the introduction of disintermediation upstream and downstream. So the introduction of a variety of different closed loop networks, whether that's in the payment side or drivers of payments, so perhaps trade finance or foreign exchange or the security side of the house, introduction of a whole host of different consortia or private closed loops or country closed loops that are there to really tackle specific market problems, but are doing so in their isolated environments. Which has led us to sort of look at differently that threat of disintermediation and the role we play for and with those particular groups. Which, when you add in the fact that there are definitely some unmet customer needs in our industry, that predictability up front of price and time, the real need for things to have almost, I would say, have payments as easy internationally as they can be domestically in many cases has been a topic that's been raised before, but becoming ever more prevalent from an unmet customer needs perspective. And of course, when you have unmet customer needs, you see increased competition. So where there is something that needs to be built on from a customer angle, you see more and more people coming into the payments market, which again leads a bit of a trigger to say, hey, what we do today, is that what we're going to have to do tomorrow? And if I was to talk maybe about a couple of the other drivers that led to this crescendo of right now being the right time to address this, I'd say it's the ongoing regulatory investment, the increased cost that comes with that investment, the increased cost that comes with us doing business, only and heightened by recent, pandemic situations we've had around the world, unfortunately. And really, lastly, I would say that much more rapid adoption of new technology that's been happening. And when you kind of bring in this perfect storm and these new technologies being new solutions for old problems or new opportunities to capture, combined with all of those market problems I was describing earlier, truly kind of does drive in the need for us to reassess, is the financial messaging we do today that was first brought out in the 1970s that revolutionized our industry, is that fit for purpose for the long-term future? Or do we need to also look at additional things that we should be doing to help solve those problems for the community and help drive financial services in its next evolution?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, completely agree with that. And I think there's been a lot of discussion lately as well about how much the industry has been able to drive ourselves forward through GPI, right? All of the improvements that have happened now that it's been really taken on board by a vast majority of Swift users. But I think, as you said, you know, it's the time to look back at this messaging system that was created in the 70s, right, to replace telex messages. And are we at a point now where continuing to do things like GPI is really going to get us to that next step, or do we have to really rethink what we're doing, right? Which is, you know, what sounds like that Swift is at that point, right? Really rethinking the whole connectivity and how things work together. So maybe just in, you know, a couple of minutes, can you tell me sort of the fundamentals of this transformation and sort of how the infrastructure itself is changing versus perhaps the incremental change that we saw with something like GPI, which did provide, you know, provides huge benefit to our customers and makes it a much better cross-border payments chain. But can you tell me a little bit about this, you know, this step forward?
Certainly, yeah, and you raise a good point. You know, we have as an industry done some pretty interesting, pretty cool things in the last months and years. And what I would say is that as part of this strategy, not only have we been doing that, we are continuing to do that, and we will continue to do that in the future, because what we do see is kind of what can be a bit of an oxymoron, but we do see this as an evolution to a revolution, if you like. And I think that's very important to bring the industry on the journey that we're going. But really, that journey will take us to a fundamentally different way of dealing with international transactions, with the goal and the strategy itself being around instant and frictionless payments when it comes to the cash side of the house. And how we look at that is, yes, this idea today where I pass something to you, you pass it to someone else, they pass it to someone else, you know, question mark, how many people are in that chain? We don't pass it around just for the sake of passing it around. Everyone in the chain has a very important part to play towards that transaction, and a very important role to play or something to do around the transaction itself. So this conversation around, well, could we just take some things out the chain, actually doesn't solve or take us much further forward towards addressing those great opportunities we have as an industry right now to address some of those problems and perceptions I've led to earlier. But what we can do, I think, is look at a little bit of a different model, where by bringing the transaction data into the center and surrounding it with transaction management, whether that's workflow management, state management, exception management, and having that in the center, that in theory, anyone in the chain can access simultaneously. They don't need to have a sequential basis. The truth of the data is always there. The richness of the data is always there. It isn't truncated or lost. People can add to or adjust for their uses, and people will be able to see what the truth, you know, was and is a bit of a revelation compared to how we do this passing of the parcel or envelope today. And I think what also it enables us to do is to then surround that core with additional value-added services, some of those that we have today or are building today, but really build around it with enhanced, you know, transaction tracking, pre-validation services, better screening solutions for the community, various options that we have available to us to actually attach around the core, meaning the community can benefit from them and people can use them or not as they see fit. Which leads then, I suppose, to the last part of the strategy, which is around the connectivities of that. Well, of course, it's important that we have that and continue to have that backwards compatibility when it comes to the ability to interact through messaging with the environment, but obviously going to a state-of-the-art next step in terms of API connectivity and utilization as a longer-term goal. And I think a lot of this not just helps us address existing industry problems, but really positions us as an industry for the next, you know, several years. I'm not going to say whether it's 10 or 40 or 100, but the next several years into the future.
So quickly now, it's hard. I don't think we can say the next 40 years.
No, exactly. I have to be cautious there, but definitely the next iteration of the life cycle of our industry.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting as you're talking about that, because I think you mentioned earlier this replication of these cross-border instant payments experience that you get through the closed loop ecosystems, right? And Swift is a very, you know, it's an ecosystem that connects a lot of these closed loop ecosystems if you're talking about domestic and country systems and payments operating in their own markets. But it sounds like, with this new strategy, it's almost like you're replicating the interaction model of these ecosystems while still keeping it relatively open, right? With the backwards compatibility with the reach of the entirety of the network. So, so I think that's hugely exciting. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, actually, because the first mention of this new strategic direction actually wasn't a few weeks ago, right? It was actually back in March. But I think at that point, all of us going into quarantine and dealing with the COVID situation, everything, I think got buried a little bit. But it was announced when Swift announced that they were, you guys are delaying the ISO migration by a year.
Yes.
And part of the reason for that is so that you could leverage this technology to make that migration, work better, especially with the interoperability period. And it sounds like you touched on some of those concepts in your previous, what you just said, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about how that sort of all came together, and how Swift, I guess, sees this ISO migration in the context of the new platform technology.
Sure, and it's a really, really important point, and I suppose one that gets a lot of dialogue and airtime also because of the cost and workload and market impact of implementing 20022, but also the potential benefits that come to the market from doing so. For us, we've been through these market migrations before, 15022, 7775, I won't date myself by going back any further, but these are painful things for the industry to implement that reap huge benefits. And I think what we realized when we started looking at the 20022 implementations that were happening around the world, we realized actually there's a better way to do this. And by not just assessing the new market problems we wanted to address, we could actually address them in a way that led us to actually realize, well, instead of every person around the world, every institution, potentially many corporates, many technology companies and players all spending what will accumulate to billions of dollars on our 20022 migrations, that we could actually bring some more of that pain and workload into the center. By having a singular transaction data model surrounded by a transaction management core with value-added services enables us to actually do a lot of that work in the center going forward and make it easier for people to move and change to the future state. And that doesn't just apply to 20022, dare I say it, whatever comes after that in the future should also be easier to implement for the industry, because again, we'll be able to do a lot more in the center than needs to be done in the periphery or in the total community. And that led us to make the strong decision that if we're going to make this better and we're going to do it in a way better way with this extra components that can really reap a lot of benefit for the industry and for financial institutions to offer better and easier things to their clients, then let's do it the right way, which did indeed lead to the delay in some timing, but actually will probably make it easier to implement for many as well.
Yeah, and I also think, when we're thinking about the platform's effect on the ISO 20022 adoption, I think there's also the benefit that it perhaps might help with adoption, and that the banks that are ready to use it, the corporates that are ready to use ISO, we can fully transact in ISO, right? We don't have to worry about those players further down the chain degrading the message. Because I think that was one of the big concerns, right? When we were originally thinking about the transition period is, okay, we've got this fantastic new ISO structured message, but what if a bank down the chain can't accept the full ISO? How are we going to sort of degrade the message structure as it is right now, so that if they have to translate it into an MT, that it'll still go through? And it's nice with this, bringing the data into the center, as you said, that you don't lose that richness, right? You don't lose the structure, and then the banks along the chain can sort of choose how they want to interact with it. I think one of the things as well, internally, and also when we talk to our bank clients, is also just reiterating that just because this functionality is coming out, it's still important for them to move to ISO. So that's something that, we've been talking to our bank clients about. By 2025, this is still coming, but it gives you that breathing space in the interim. Which I think is also a really nice function of the platform. So can you also just tell me a little bit more about the banks that you've been working with. So I just mentioned some of the conversations that we've had with some of the banks in our community and some of our clients. And it seems like to me, even in this environment, there is excitement around all of this, right? There is a willingness to sort of talk and explore. And I think everybody is somewhat in agreement, right, that it is time to really boldly move forward, even though, again, the environment is quite tricky and we're all being pulled in a lot of different directions, but that there are fundamentals to this that really resonate with people and make sense. I also see a lot of willingness in the banking community to start talking about APIs and wanting to experiment with APIs in a way that I haven't seen before. But maybe you can tell me a little bit about the conversations that you're having with the banking community, the level of excitement around this. And I think also tying back to the ISO migration, I think the level of excitement varied across the community, because some people just saw it as a burden, other people, were really, really keen on it. But I think this is a bit different, right? I do feel like those that have been speaking about this, there is a level of excitement that I haven't necessarily seen with just the ISO migration on its own.
Yeah, you raise a great point, and obviously the uniqueness of who we are, cooperative owned by our members, 11,000, connections and drivers of the business we do as a community means that anything we want to take to the next level has to be done in a way that is indeed backwards compatible, so that we both don't disadvantage those who want to move the fastest or lose those who will be slower to the table. And how do we make it that we can actually accelerate people to do so as part of the journey we've been going on? And as we are a cooperative, it's been an extensive consultation period since, nearly 12 months now, since the strategy was born from dialogues with clients like yourselves and others that really led to the creation of the strategy and the constant refinement and enhancement of why we were doing this, what it would be we're going to do, and lastly, of course, how we're going to do it. And actually, you're onto a good thing when the people you're consulting with and engaging with start pressurizing you to move faster. And that actually just shows you're definitely
There's no pressure. There's no pressure. No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. We are very excited about it. So, absolutely having that pressure in the community, pressuring you guys to do it is a great thing. But sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's great. And it's that pressure does help you understand the priority, right? And when you hear it from multiple sources of your owners that, yep, hey, this is great. When can I have it? When can I use it? How do I get there? Whether that's, the large GTBs like yourselves that are out there, whether it's their own corresponding network and client base in the FI space, whether it's the end corporate or consumer clients that are out there, you're hearing the same messages and same noise about the same market demand, unmet customer needs needing to be addressed, making it easier for us to do so. And actually that same community that came on this journey where we said, hey, we have point-to-point messaging. How do we get better tracking of time and fees across that? Well, we came up with the idea of GPI and a cloud where we can feed information into and out of that to understand where things are. It doesn't fall over. If someone in the chain falls over, you can still see what happened before and after. A natural evolution to get to some answers of that tracking side that leads naturally into the next evolution of saying, well, if we can do that in the middle, we could actually do everything in the middle and actually mitigate all of this and enhance everyone's experience is indeed phenomenal. And yeah, it's really, for Swift, it's really about, you spend the time on the foundations, whether you're building the skyscraper, you spend, 90% of the time on the foundations, which is making sure you understand why, what, and how you want to do it, understanding the impact for all the different profiles of your partners in your 11,000 members, and really working out that you are going to go on a journey that is viable and achievable in a short period of time. That means that as we've launched the strategy now formally externally, we are lined up completely and ready and raring to go to implement, to partner with the industry to take it forward and have a great model to do so. And I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but having the 2022 migration dates in front of us gives us hard stops for some of these things, which is also a very good thing in such a strategic project, because it forces you to prioritize, to accelerate, but also to have a hard stop on when you get to certain stages of that evolution. That, by the way, doesn't end in 2 years, that actually I see as a continual improvement. And in my role as the new Chief Strategy Officer will be about not just how do we execute on that strategy, but how does it continually improve as well going forward.
Yeah. And I think you know, this concept of cross-border payments being as instant and frictionless and seamless as a domestic instant payment scheme, right? Or what we experience in our daily lives through paying through a Zelle or through wallets or things like that. I mean, is hugely exciting for anybody in the payment space. And like you said, for corporates, for individuals, for consumers, I mean, it's, you know, it really is what I think we kind of all aspire to. And as banks, we aspire to provide to our clients. And just speaking from my perspective, the thing that makes it really exciting, because there have been challengers and new market entrants and fintechs who've sort of flouted, right, that this client experience. But I think what makes it really exciting, as you mentioned, you're a cooperative community of 11,000 institutions, right? So I think Swift is very uniquely positioned to actually have the scale to make good on this. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing for our clients is that we can make these payments anywhere around the world, right? It's one thing to say, I've created this amazing cross-border instant payment scheme, but it only works for these, you know, 5 bank accounts in these 3 countries, and you have to meet all this criteria. The ubiquity and the scale of this, the potential of it is hugely exciting. So what would you tell the community sort of as a call to action? Because, you know, I'm also conscious that this isn't just Swift flips a switch and we all do cross-border instant payments, right? This is, all of us need to do our part. So what's your sort of, you know, call to action to the community to say, this is what you guys need to start thinking about. This is how we move in this direction.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because indeed, you know, we are a representation of the community and we will provide the platform for the community to move forward on this next part of the journey, whether that's a bank, whether that's a market infrastructure, whether that's indeed a financial technology firm or a directly connected corporate or the broker dealers that are out there. We have a large swathe of different types of client segments who have different benefits and different impacts, either directly or indirectly through their banks to all of this. But I think what I would say is what my ask or call to the community is to keep the engagement we've had today. And that will only get more and more and bigger and more granular. Right now, we've been consulting and engaging with samples of our community on the sort of why we need to do something, the what we're going to do, and the beginnings of how we're going to do it. The next phase is, yes, us building, but as part of that building, it's about, you know, user groups coming into those conversations, picking off certain topics that are of particular relevance or interest for a market or for a certain player or a certain market infrastructure, be that pre-validation, be that how we look at sanctions, trying to make that more seamless within the and frictionless within the process, whether that's how we look at the predictability of the cost of a transaction, different models for different client segments. You know, all of these things require engagement from the community to not just define how we're going to do it, but really to test it with us and to come through on those proof of concepts and those term I've begun to use quite a lot since I joined Swift, the coalitions of the willing, you know, the samples of our industry that get together and push forward, in essence, on behalf of the industry, because you can't have 11,000 of your members do the pilot with you. So you need to sample a smaller number and have those people engage and represent the community. And large GTBs like Citibank represent their client base, who are a large part of our community. Work with different national member groups of Swift to define their marketplace and really have that as the driver to decide indeed not just how we get to the end game, but which priorities should come first in such a conversation. Where's the biggest impact to the community? How can we have large scale impact quickly? And I think that's my call to the community, is keep engaging with us and never be frightened to ask us a question and volunteer to get involved. Just be careful what you wish for, because when you do volunteer to get involved, we will involve you.
Yeah, no, that's great. So thanks so much, Dave, for taking the time to talk about this. Like I said at the beginning, I think this is a hugely exciting time for Swift, for the community, for the industry. I think you're going to have your work cut out for you over the next few years, but it's fantastic, and we're very happy to partner with Swift on this journey. So thanks so much.
No, thank you for being here, and I look forward to coming back in the future to talk about what's been delivered and the impact.
We'd be happy to have you back. Yes, that sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you.